Afternoon, it's Friday the 3rd of April 2020, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Okay, let's get straight on because we've a lot to get through today. So we'll just run through the official figures so far. The number of global cases has run over the million mark, so we've got 1,030,571 cases, 54,226 deaths. 220,031 recoveries globally so far, and that means that we have 756,314 active cases at the moment, of which 718,136 are mild, and 38,178 are considered serious or critical. Euromomo has released new statistics, which brings us up to week 13, which is a week ago. And this is the graph for Europe, or the graphic for Europe that they've produced, showing very high excess deaths in Italy and Spain, high in the UK, and normal just about everywhere else. Now, the first thing we want to say here is, the question is there anything unusual about this? And so let's look at another time in history, not so long ago. This is week 2 of 2017. And in fact, excess mortality, according to Euromomo, was very high across Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Greece. And we had high and more or less expected in Scandinavia, Ireland, and the UK. So really, the point here is not a huge amount of difference compared to previous years. Let's look at the overall graphic that they have produced for this year. And what we have here, if we see here, this is the 65 plus graphic showing some excess mortality over and above the average. But if we look in previous years, each previous year, we've got excess mortality which outstrips what's going on this year. Now, as I say, this brings us up to 1 week ago. So again, the question has to be asked, what's going on here, because it looks like absolutely nothing exceptional is going on at all.
And Mike, the younger age groups, as you can see on those graphs, they're below average, aren't they? They're lower than previous years on all those other age groups. So if there was a really virile pandemic in progress, wouldn't you see more spikes in all of those areas?
Well, this is an extremely important point, and we'll be coming on to that in a moment. Let me just remind you, this is the World Health Organization Q&A, similarities and differences between COVID-19 and influenza. Well, the key paragraph here is this one. The speed of transmission is an important point of difference between the two viruses, and they say that the serial interval for COVID-19 virus is estimated to be 5 to 6 days, while for influenza virus, the serial interval is 3 days. That means that influenza can spread faster than COVID-19, so we're just going to produce a quick graph. Basically, 2 times faster is where we are with flu in terms of spread, according to the World Health Organization. And then we've got this, COVID-19 mortality twice as high for men in Italy as women. Now, this is a report from ABC News about 2 weeks ago. And this is very important because the question that has to be asked is there anything unusual going on here? Or are we seeing something which is absolutely normal? So the point they're making is mortality is twice as high for men in Italy as women. Well, isn't this what normally happens when people get older? So we've got a virus here which is attacking apparently mainly older people. And in the older generations, we see that men die faster than women. And in fact, this is confirmed here. Here is the Max Planck Institute, male-female differences in mortality in the developed world. And if we look at their graph here, we draw a line across at twice as likely to die, we find that beginning at around the age 60, men are twice as likely to die as women, and that the countries they've chosen for this particular graph, and the data is coming from the United Nations, is Denmark, France, Poland, and Germany. So a spread of European countries showing pretty much the same sort of thing.
And this goes in line with other reporting we're seeing, Mike, from medical professionals saying that a lot of people, particularly in Italy, in fact, 99% of the deaths in Italy have underlying chronic health conditions, multiple, in fact, underlying chronic health conditions. That's from the Italian Health Institute's own numbers. But what are those chronic health ailments, Mike? They're things like hypertension, heart conditions, respiratory conditions, And certainly in a population where you have a lot of men who smoke, for instance, this wouldn't be uncommon over the age of 70, nor would hypertension or heart conditions and things like that over the age of 80, for instance. And that was really accounted for 80% of the fatalities in Italy.
Right. So this is a very important point as well, and one, in fact, that the BBC have acknowledged. But you wouldn't know it if you went to this article. Because this was published on the 1st of April, Coronavirus, How to Understand the Death Toll, and you can see the URL at the bottom of the screen there. This article written by Nick Triggle on the 1st of April, as I say. But the problem is that somebody had sent me some text from this article a couple of weeks ago. And in fact, when I went back to read this article again, that text wasn't there. I found that very strange. So we go to the Wayback Machine and we find that, in fact, this same URL had this headline on the 21st of March. In fact, this snapshot is from the 23rd of March. Coronavirus deaths, what we don't know. So they not only changed the title, keeping the URL the same, but they changed the body of the text, keeping the URL the same. Now, I don't know what you think about this, Patrick, but this seems like pretty bogus editorial policy to me. Because what that means is that if people bookmark something, they go back at a later time and find different information to what they saw in the first place. So the question in my mind was, what was the text that they wanted to change? And it was this. So here's what they wrote. Every year, more than 500,000 people die in England and Wales. Factor in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and the figure tops 600,000. The coronavirus deaths will not be on top of this. Many would be within this normal number of expected deaths. That was conceded by Sir Patrick at a press conference on Thursday when he said there would be some overlap between coronavirus deaths and expected deaths. He just didn't know how much of an overlap. So this, Patrick, seems to me to be an unbelievable piece of editorial decision by the BBC to remove this absolutely critical piece of information from public view, because what we're talking about here is that in order to say that there is a pandemic which requires the type of draconian action that we've seen, the destruction of our economy that we're seeing, there's got to be something out of the ordinary going on. So what we have is a virus which, according to the BBC, at one point in time was going to be within the normal expected levels of deaths. We've got a virus which is attacking older people, apparently, and a virus which is causing absolutely the normal number of deaths, but relative between men and women. So there's nothing strange going on at all here, but it doesn't end there.
But just one point I want to make on the BBC, Mike. This is the most important, arguably, media outlet in the country. This is effectively the national broadcaster, and they're acting like the Ministry of Truth. In this type of situation where the news is fluid, they'll just change it as it goes. The BBC becomes Wikipedia in that sense. It becomes the Ministry of Truth. That's kind of disturbing considering it's the biggest supposed health crisis in the history of the country, in modern times at least. To see this being done by the top media outlet in the country, one of the supposedly most preeminent in the world, that's really disturbing.
Absolutely, and what you would normally expect to see, of course, is you would see the article with its publication date, you would see an updated date, and within the body of the text, it would explicitly say what's been updated. This is transparency. In this case, the BBC hasn't done that.
So they're trying to manage the narrative, essentially.
That is exactly what's going on, but it doesn't end there. Here is an Italian website. This is about the number of deaths of doctors in Italy. And I'm very sad that these people have passed away, but that's the way it is. And they list 40 of them in total. Let's have a look at some of them. This is the first 7. And if you go to this website now, you see their names, what they did, and the dates that they passed away. But if you'd gone to this website a couple of weeks ago, you would have found that it included their birth dates. So this is a pretty critical piece of information because their birth dates, 1952, 1946, 1956, 1940, 1940, 1946, and 1949 on screen there. So these people are all retired. They are not serving doctors, they're retired. And so as a result, we've got to say that this website has been changed to remove that critical piece of information.
This is stunning, Mike, because the media have run with this talking point that doctors are dying in Italy. And it's really making headlines, and very emotive headlines at that. And what you've just shown us there is a total deception. regarding this, and this is from what should be a national sort of record-keeping website here. It should be a definitive, resource for people.
Yes.
And they're glossing over their birth dates to show that they're not actually serving doctors in some cases.
Absolutely. So now we have a guest with us to talk about the numbers a little bit more, Patrick.
Yes, we'd like to welcome on the program Andrew Mather. He's from Peerless Reads. A lot of people might already be familiar with Andrew's work. His YouTube videos have been extremely well watched in the last couple of weeks especially. He's a mathematician. He's 6 years in the City of London working in British finance and a lifetime in technology. And we want to welcome you to the UK Column News this afternoon, Andrew.
Hi, it's an honor. And can I say, excellent coverage. And you've already highlighted in your excess mortality the fundamental observation that there is nothing special going on. I got involved solely because I got deeply disturbed by the nonsense that was being spouted in the media, by the news, by the government. And I have to say, and I've warned you and you're aware of this, that I'm about to show you publicly available information that shows that the UK government, Imperial College in particular, just plucked a number out of thin air, exaggerating the real risk of the virus by 150 times. This country would not have shut down for the estimated 3,500 deaths that would be a reasonable estimate. They literally invented a number close to our annual deaths of 550,000 a year, purely scare us. It is an entire fiction. And then it gets worse. As soon as we are safely indoors, they revise the numbers down, 256,000, 20,000, 5,700. Now they take credit, but only if we continue to be good boys and girls. They just sit back and let the virus occur as it was going to occur anyway, and they have made the sun rise in the morning. We will all worship thee, Lord. We have meekly walked into our homes and locked ourselves in on the basis of a terrible lie, far greater than weapons of mass destruction and the 2003 war. It is an atrocious lie, and you're going to see exactly how obvious that is. So, Patrick, head on, first slide, let's have a look.
Yeah, so this is the source and example of your calculations. Just explain us what we're looking at here and how you developed your methodology, Andrew.
Well, it's so simple, it's hardly a methodology. These are the World Health Organization daily situation reports. And as I say, the irony is people say you can't trust China data, you can't trust World Health Organization. In my experience, government data, British government data, American government data, World Health Organization data is excellent. It's what the politicians do with it. They ignore it to tell you their preferred agenda. The data is excellent. So if you bring it back, let's go through it.
Sure.
So what you have here is the 15th of March, which is the last time China reported Hubei or broke down the provinces, because by then the experience was over. From thousands of deaths a day, they were down to a few tens or 100. Hubei experienced 96% of China's deaths. It was the worst hit province, between 50 and 100 times worse than the next four provinces. In other words, in the only country in the world to have completed the virus experience, and in all those provinces that you can see listed, Hubei was the worst province of the only country to have completed the virus. In other words, this was the only worst case in the real world that the scientists could consider. Now, whether you can see the calculations there, but I've done them for you. Basically, 3,000 cases out of 59 million people. It's not even maths. Britain is 66 million. So what is a reasonable estimate for Britain? 60 million, 3,000. 66 at 10%, 3,300. That is the only real-world data point you can use. We'll look at Italy in a second. This is the only completed data point in the entire world. Now, what if you claimed to write a PhD thesis on the Mona Lisa and you refused to look at the Mona Lisa? Do you think that your thesis would be reasonable? It might be a fascinating thesis. It just wouldn't be on the Mona Lisa. The Imperial College scare document, this generation's dodgy dossier, might be a wonderful document. But if you change your figure from 3,000 to 500,000, it's a work of fiction. Did Boris Johnson stand up and say, by the way, I've got a great story, April 1st is coming up soon. Just listen to this one. It's a great, great, great story. Chief Medical Officer, why don't you? No, they said we have a grave crisis, and here are the numbers. 530,000 of you could die if we do nothing. No, 3,000 of us might die if we do nothing, and that's 2 days normal deaths.
Yes.
So basically, they plucked a figure out of nowhere, purely to scare us. It is this generation's WMD, but unlike WMD, this time we all walked meekly into our homes and are under house arrest. Now, let's see. That was available to the scientists right then. Now, let's look at the real world in Europe.
Yeah.
So, fire it up. So, this chart has a lot of things to show you. Firstly, the nonsense about exponential growth. That's the straight line that's flesh-colored going straight up in a diagonal. The virus is not exponential. It's similar to a log-normal distribution. Now, the second element is, just like a ball thrown into the air, it rises, it slows down, goes over the top, and it falls. And when you add it up cumulatively, you see this classic curve. And here is a critical point. You look at any of those curves. The green one is Italy. The orange one is Hubei, delayed so that we can see it in the same timescale. The crisis is not over when the last person dies. That's when the contagion is over. The crisis is over the moment you see the line curling over and slowing down. Think about it. If a car is hurtling towards you and it scares the hell out of you because it's going to hit you, when do you feel safe? Do you wait till it's gone past you? The moment you see the car turning away from you, you know you're safe. It's going to miss. The government knew on the 3rd, on the 16th, on the 23rd, when they announced lockdown, they already had these curves. They already knew the crisis was over. If anything, they hurried to get locked down in before it was obvious to everybody that this was going to just ride out with very few deaths. Now look at level that all the, sorry, back Patrick, sorry, you've anticipated me a little.
Yeah.
Now look at the level of those dotted lines and the level of the solid lines, and look at the left-hand side. That's your cases per 100 million population. If 5,000 people die in Norway, a population of 5 million, and 5,000 people die in the USA, a population of 320 million, Norway is getting hit a lot worse than the USA. So we have normalized it to 100 million population. So Britain is about 2/3 of that number. So that's 100,000. our real number will be about 66,000 or something like that, in terms of factors. 66,000 cases, and as you pointed out, even if you take 50%, that's 30,000 cases. 5%, as you cited, it's 3,000 cases. So yeah, it's probably more like 30,000 cases. And the mortality for that, you might get 5% of 30,000. So that's 1,500 cases. So those charts show, and I'm probably getting my maths wrong on TV, but you get the idea. They're not 500,000. And most importantly, those curves were real before lockdown. They'll be real through lockdown, and they'll be real after lockdown. We never needed lockdown. We walked into our homes solely because they invented a crisis. And to see how unreasonable that invention is, look at the dotted pink line at the top. That, and remember, this is a log scale, that is the 40 million or so cases that would account for the deaths, 550,000 deaths that they need. Look at the curve. It's not even close. It's out by a magnitude of 100. It's purely fraudulent invention. And I'm afraid that is the story, and it's as simple as that. We are facing another WMD. So, up to you, carry on. We can move on to the next slide if you like.
Yeah,
any questions?
we'll move on to the next one. Explain to us what's happening here, Andrew.
Okay, so for this again has a number of different things which are really important. Firstly, our friends in America, the sort of medium blue, and Canada, the red. These guys, like us, but I think even more so, have been massively on the be scared, lock down, be scared. I hear that men are cutting down trees armed with guns to stop people leaving villages. Well, all that I can say is all that their be scared narrative has achieved is to basically delay the inevitable, create a great deal of difficulty and hardship for their country, but look at the way they're pointing. They're climbing rapidly to join Hubei and Italy. And let's talk about Hubei. China lied. Well, if China said we had 10 people die, and actually it was 1,000, then we will rapidly go past 10 people and say, hey, China lied. But you look at that orange curve, only Italy has gone past Hubei, only Italy. Everyone else, and we're all basically headed for Hubei. China didn't lie. They gave us excellent data to measure the likely chance of deaths and new cases. And it was the UK government that lied. Simply, absolutely pure invention. Simple as that. Now, if I can go back to that chart for a second, if you can, unless you want to shut me down, but that's cool. Now, let's look at that light blue line, right? Let's pretend. Look at the slowdown. That's lockdown. Well done. Bravo. Slowed everything down. No, that's Sweden. 0 preventative measures. They have curled over really rapidly. They're curling over, so they're going to flatten out way below America and probably below Canada. So Sweden basically said, yeah, okay, it's a virus, let's have it. So they are pretty much done. They're going to end up with a lower number of cases, and they have none of the economic damage or the political or democratic damage that our governments have created. So these graphs prove, and they were available to the government long before they chose to lock us down, these charts prove that the government basically lied, created a scenario that was completely overwhelmingly scary, completely unnecessary, and that we're headed right where we were going to be headed anyway, and they are going to take the credit for saving us when they didn't do a damn thing but scare the hell out of us. That's it.
So Andrew, that brings up a question. I'll just bring up this image here of the nightingale hospital, which they're building in the Excel Center in London. And this is really a lot in the news right now. There's a lot of discussion and hype about this new hospital facility, this temporary hospital that's got thousands of beds, going to require 16,000 NH staff, according to Sky News here. So based on the numbers that you showed us, Andrew, and you're saying that Europe's kind of in the process of already curling over, or these numbers would have already been able to be calculated weeks ago, if not longer. Who do they expect to put in these thousands of beds in this hospital, or is this just a photo op? This is the big question. What do you think?
That's an awesome question, and I'll tell you. Sadly, I don't have the link on this computer. I'm sure you'll find it. American reporters and I mean reporters, men on the street. When you had, I think it was the CBS that had they used the Italian footage to show the crisis in the American hospitals.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
And you've got, it's a wonderful clip, and you'll have to link it up and show it to people later. But basically, it's an awesome YouTube clip, and they've got the mayor of New York is like, "What use is 300 ventilators? I need 30,000 ventilators." And they show the news clips and here's the line of people at the COVID processing center. And there's this hospital is overwhelmed. And then you get the guy that lives in Brooklyn, goes to the local Brooklyn hospital the next day with his phone camera, and the waiting room is deserted. The COVID line is deserted. And you've got a guy in Queens, and he goes to the hospital the next day after the news report, and the place is deserted. And you've got all these Americans, I mean, bless you for common sense, all these Americans going along the day after the crisis that is reported in the news, and the hospitals are deserted. So, you know what? If you see a crowd in that Princess Elizabeth or, whatever it is, hospital thing, if you see a crowd, I would stop them at the exit, follow them home, check their resume, see if they advertise on Freelancer as actors or whether they got paid 50 quid. Because seriously, if American citizens, God bless you, are going along and finding empty hospitals the day after the crisis, either the medical system is so extraordinary or it's yet more fakery. And here's the good news about this entire crisis. Provided that you get this message out, this generation will have its WMD. It first alarmed me and then amuses me that I get young people on our videos saying, "It's a great video, it's a great video." What's WMD? It's like, that was where the government lied to take us to war. And you have no idea. And here we are again, the government lying to put us in our home. And I'll just close. There's one more slide. It's very simple. But I'm going to close with an observation. In 9/11, the agenda was clear. In WMD, the agenda was clear. War with the Muslim countries. Hello? Who does that serve? It was an invention to take us to war against Islam. I can't think who is an enemy of Islam. I don't know. Call me stupid.
Well, here's the point.
Here's the point. Provided that this generation and people our age inform this generation, and the lie is revealed, this generation will hopefully not make the mistake of allowing the next generation to forget it.
One hopes.
That's it.
One hopes. And here's Dr. Neil Ferguson from Imperial College. That's who Andrew was referring to before, unofficially known as Dr. Death from Imperial College. He also brought us the foot and mouth debacle as well. So there is pedigree and form there, Mike, in terms of the over-exaggerating of the crises. And we'll talk more about that with the H1N1 scare. But here's the final slide here, Andrew, and just walk us through this. Fact, not fear. What's your final summary here, and what do people need to know?
This is a critical slide because on YouTube, the government, they're telling you, it's 10 times worse than flu. Actually, it's not. But I decided not to publish those with you because somebody else can do that. These are my numbers. The risk you have, I don't want to alarm you, Patrick, especially, and you, Mike. You're both looking a little old. I don't know if you're aware of it yet, but you will die. I'm not aware of any human being in the history, even our Lord Jesus Christ, died. I'm not aware of anyone that has escaped death. Ordinary life is dangerous. So give us the numbers, let's have a look. What we're showing on the left is your normal mortality at age 18. And I think those numbers came from France, but Western society. 18.02, 45.2, 75.2%. We've taken the infection risk from Hubei, about 1 in 872 people. Forget the exponential, you're all going to get it, and then a lot of us are going to die. 1 in 1,000, 1 in 872, because to die from coronavirus, you first have to get it. So we have the death risk supplied by China CDC, which numbers have proven to be extremely accurate. Thank you, China. The Hubei risk of catching it, which has proven to be extremely accurate. Thank you, China. Combining to show the mortality for the virus at age 18. And this is walking around the street in an infected area, no lockdown, or I won't say no lockdown. 30 countries we track, there is no evidence the lockdown is helping. America, it's hurting. Sweden, they did brilliantly without it. Normal life, 0.02. Virus mortality, 0.0002. You are 91 times more likely to die from normal life in an infected area than from the virus. Age 45, 444 times. At 75, 218 times. Normal life is going to get you every time, except for the very, very rare occasion this year only that is the virus. And you highlighted this, and people have been reporting this to me. There are now documented instructions that if somebody has the virus and dies within 60 days, that's a COVID death. Like those doctors who died of old age, they took the birth rate out to make that. Oh, didn't notice that. So now the deaths will be inflated. But you know what? It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's too late because the World Health Organization daily situation reports are a matter of record. Download them, copy them. They are your record for a judicial inquiry and trial of every human being who has supported, created, and enforced the threat of lockdown against free people on the basis of a lie.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. Of course, you're welcome to stay on the line. We might come back to you later in the program, but Andrew's YouTube channel is called Peerless Reads. Peerless Reads, and his name is Andrew Mather. And you will also link to his work as well on social media throughout this crisis, however long it lasts. But Andrew, your work is absolutely stunning and simple and easy to follow, and we really appreciate your contribution today.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to Matt Hancock, who of course gave the live stream yesterday. He seems to have recovered very quickly from COVID-19 himself, and he was singing like a nightingale yesterday afternoon, telling us that he is going to write off £13 billion of NHS debt. He is going to be rolling out tests all of a sudden. Of course, this morning he's extremely happy that the Excel Centre has now been turned into the Nightingale Centre, and it's now open for business. Now they're going to start transferring people from other hospitals into this place over the weekend and early next week. And the message that we have from NHS doctors that we know is that people are going to die in this place. And one of the reasons is, as you said earlier in the programme, Patrick, 16,000 staff required in order to run this thing. Now, the problem is that the doctors that we're speaking to are saying that there are not enough qualified staff. Now, what do they mean by that? Well, most of these people are going to end up being intubated on incubators in this place, they're going to be intubated, and there aren't enough people that are qualified to run that process. Now, the problem with it is that in order to stick this tube down people's throats, people need to be unconscious for that, so they're going to be put into some kind of induced coma. The drugs involved in managing that are extremely powerful, and that needs to be managed extremely closely. And so, again, if people die in this place, and the advice we have is that people are going to die in it, they are going to die mostly because of the medical intervention rather than the disease itself.
And still there's no record or no announcements of exactly how many hospitals are being, quote, overrun in the country. How many medical facilities? Is it 4? Is it 3? Is it 2? Is it 10? Is it 50? There's been no sort of records or details given to say exactly how many of these NHS hospitals are overrun in the country. So then that's kind of an important detail, Mike, especially if you're going to be opening large triage hospitals with thousands of beds. Is it really necessary? Will they get better care in a normal facility or in the Nightingale Exhibition Center facility? I don't think they'll get better care in an exhibition hall setting than they would in a normal clinic or ICU unit. But so this brings us to the issue of a care pathway, Mike. And I'm going to read something that was sent to us by one of our viewers. And this is a very personal story. This is only a couple of days old, but let's hear what he had to say. My brother-in-law had been ill for 7 years. His condition included kidney failure, diabetes. He'd been on dialysis 3 times a week, in and out of the hospital for a few years, clearly in pain and suffering on medication, not well at all. On the evening of the 31st of March, this is just a couple of days ago, he was admitted into a large North London hospital. He was kept in A&E and then transferred to resuscitation unit and then to ICU. And he goes on to say, at some point, he was apparently tested for coronavirus, COVID-19. We are unsure about this, though, as my wife spoke to the doctor, and he did not seem that confident of this. However, at approximately 9 to 10 p.m., the doctor informed my wife that there was nothing more they could do for him. My understanding is he was wheeled into the blue zone at that point, and all treatment was withdrawn, and the doctor made it clear he would not last to the morning. And finally, my wife could not visit him or see her brother. He died at 2 a.m. on April 1st. His widow is now quarantined for 14 days. At home alone. We don't know when the funeral will be, but it has been made clear that only a few people can attend, and they must practice social distancing at the funeral. So his mother and father are abroad and will not be able to attend their son's funeral. So this is someone who's relatively young, Mike, probably in their 50s, okay, but clearly with a number of chronic, serious underlying health conditions. Truly, this is truly a tragic situation reflecting the challenges of our times, he said. This is imagine being in this situation. That's all I can say, Mike. And this brings up this issue, and we'll talk about this. This was in the news, if you remember a couple of years ago, the controversy over the NHS death pathway and death panels. And this was from the Telegraph. This is from 2011, this story, and the NHS must come clean over the use of death pathways. And of course, this it startled and upset quite a few people in the country over those years. This was a major controversy. This was something that really was a battle the NHS was fighting in terms of public confidence at this point. And so my question, Mike, is, are we seeing a resumption of this type of a policy, but under the guise of this supposed pandemic? In other words, is the corona really being used as a mechanism to institute these policies that a lot of people were horrified by in previous years? This is
a very good question.
That's the question that we're asking here. So this brings us, of quickly to this story, Mike. Elderly face NHS discrimination under new UN health or death targets. Sorry, the NHS could be led to discriminate against the over 70s to meet highly unethical UN health targets, which seek to reduce premature deaths in younger people, senior medics have warned. So this is from 2015. This is really a follow-on from that same type of situation. And so this basically, under the proposed Sustainable Development Goals, UN member states will be given targets to cut the number of deaths from diseases like cancer and stroke, diabetes and dementia by 1/3 by 2030, Agenda 2030 goals, okay, from the UN. So the problem here, Mike, is people, because many are age-related illnesses, people who succumb to these diseases from the age of 70 are not deemed to have died prematurely and are not included in the target. So you can see that there are international agendas, Mike, that make their way down to national health care providers and services, and that is kind of geared towards that really that death pathway type policy. And this is from the United Nations themselves. That story is from 2015, Mike. So that's what we're saying. Is this something to really be possibly look at really closely?
Absolutely. Now, in the meantime, Peter Hitchens, of course, has been really the only lone voice up until now on this issue in the mainstream press. What's Simon Jenkins' position on the whole thing, Patrick?
Well, this is a pretty stunning article here by veteran Guardian writer Simon Jenkins. He says, was I wrong about coronavirus? Even the world's best scientists can't tell me. And in this piece, this is an op-ed piece which ran yesterday, Simon Jenkins pointed out something that is so important. And if you remember the first press conference, which was given by the Prime Minister, and he had his science advisors, Sir Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitby, is it Whitty?
Yep.
Whitby,
yep.
Next to him. And the initial assessment they gave was very similar, if not really the same approach that Sweden was going to take to the crisis. And immediately they were gang tackled, attacked, the media just savaged them for days. And so what happened, then Boris came back on his own and announced a complete U-turn. And this is interesting, and this is the point I'll make, Mike, that the government at that point, a Tory government, a conservative government, was more afraid that they could lose power or lose public confidence because they didn't do enough about a proposed crisis. So imagine that. That's the state of politics, the state of government in 2020. So they turned around, and Neil Ferguson, Imperial College, voila, came up with the magic numbers, 500,000 dead, and all of a sudden, the policy had to change at that point. That speaks absolute volumes to where we're at in the West in terms of our governments, in terms of the relationship between the public, between governments and their experts, and quote, science experts in places like Imperial College. This isn't the first time, Mike, that this has happened.
Absolutely. Now we got to press on, I'm afraid. But here we go. The Express. This is Frederick Forsyth. Now another voice speaking out. Is virus really as bad as we are being told? I strongly suggest people go and read what he has to say. Now here we have France 24 from a day or two ago, making the point that French officials have now officially authorized chloroquine prescriptions to help with this situation. Chloroquine seems to have been showing to have itself to have veracity in dealing with this.
And the Chinese have been using it as well to great success.
And the Germans now have looked at Avigan, which is a Japanese antiviral normally used for flu, which seems to be having a positive effect on people that are infected with this. And then another voice coming out here from ZDF talking about this, another voice coming out and saying that the cure is worse than the disease. This is Gerard Krauss, who's an epidemiologist, very senior epidemiologist in Germany. We have to keep these serious social measures as short and low as possible because they could potentially cause more illnesses and deaths than the coronavirus itself. And he said, although my focus is on infectious disease, I believe it's imperative that we consider the impact on other areas of health and society. We as a society must not focus solely on the victims of the coronavirus. In the meantime, Patrick, we have the likes of Nigel Farage now coming out and saying really, well, he said this in a report to Sky News, I think it was a couple of days ago, when Germany refused to export medical masks to Italy despite desperate state they were in, guess who stepped into the breach? The people who caused it, the Chinese. And he said, and what we're seeing over much of the world is China now acting as the charitable godfather, dishing out money, dishing out medical equipment, and trying to use this crisis to gain global power. Now, would I suggest for 1 second that Nigel Farage is pushing somebody else's narrative? But I think that's exactly what's going on here. We're starting to see increasingly the narrative being pushed that China is to blame for all this. And really, what have we got to do? Kill China? Is that really where we're heading at the moment?
Well, this talking point of China being the enemy and this being a Chinese virus, this has been seeded in what's called the alt-right in America, because Donald Trump himself will go and show you this is really what Trump's been battling in the press for so long here. President Trump uses the term Chinese virus to describe the coronavirus, prompting a backlash. We spoke about this before on the program, Mike. So this is clearly where Nigel is really getting his talking points here. And so what does this mean? Well, let's look here. This is Foreign Affairs magazine just today. China's coming upheaval.
So this is the Council of Foreign Relations?
This is the CFR. This is their mouthpiece, Foreign Affairs magazine. A competition, the coronavirus, and the weakness of Xi Jinping. So clearly, this isn't just confined, Mike, to Donald Trump. This is a United States policy of antagonizing China. And what they're doing is they're preparing the West, the United States, and its allies to be on war footing. I'm not saying war yet, but war footing with China and its allies. So if Russia is China's ally, that's a fait accompli. So we have a very dangerous situation where you have, again, nuclear powers facing off with a biological warfare narrative sitting in the background. So this could be a hot on-off, hot-cold war for the next 50 or 60 years. Certainly, I think this is something that Washington might be looking at. Otherwise, why would they be baiting China now for really the last 3 years on multiple fronts? And now they have a reason for American people to hate China for causing this terrible pandemic that ruined so many people's lives without ever laying any finger of blame on their own governments for shutting down their economies and societies. So this is quite disturbing on a number of levels, Mike. So.
Yep, and so the next one then, China concealed extent of virus outbreak, US intelligence. Well, I think we've heard today that they absolutely did not do this.
No, that's correct. So this is from the intelligence community. China has concealed the extent of the coronavirus outbreak in its country, underreporting, they say, both total cases and deaths. It suffered from the disease. The U.S. intelligence community concluded in a classified report, so we can't read it, to the White House, according to 3 U.S. officials. So unnamed anonymous sources in a classified report, says the intelligence community. So I suppose it's true then.
Well, Andrew made the point, comparing this to the weapons of mass destruction dossier. That's exactly what we've got here, isn't it?
That's what we're looking at right there,
yes.
100%. So,
well, look, if China's getting the blame for this, I just wanted to make this point because here's the Daily Mail from, when was this, 2018. Why I believe a killer flu pandemic is lurking just beyond the corner and it could kill 33 million people in the first 200 days. Well, Jonathan Quick here really starting the Daily Mail's typical headline here, but this was the point. The point that he was making and here, scientists traced, this is the swine flu H1N1, scientists traced the virus's genes to a massive North Carolina pig farm in 1998. Now, I don't remember anybody saying we should all bomb the United States because
bomb the pig farms.
Absolutely, because the US had attacked the rest of the world on the basis of this. But just to remind everybody what the media was like at that time, swine flu sweeps the globe. Millions of people are going to die. This was the media at the time, and it was Simon Jenkins at the time, or after that, swine flu, a panic stoked in order to posture and spend. He said here, appropriately panicked. On Monday, ministers plunged into their Cobra bunker beneath Whitehall to prepare for the worst. Had Tony Blair been about, they would have worn germ warfare suits. British government is barking mad. Well, they were barking mad then, just as they're barking mad, it seems, now. And let's just remind everybody about Cheryl Atkinson. She was making the point that, of course, once the final numbers were in fact, almost nobody had H1N1 at the time, despite the the furore. We didn't shut anything down at the time, but there was a media furore over it. The false pandemic, the Mail said in 2010, drug firms cashed in on scare over swine flu, claims Eurohealth chief. Well, of course, this is going to happen once again. And here is an article from the British Medical Journal. Well, you'll notice that this article has a correction. Now, we'll explain the correction in a second, but the title is Conflicts of Interest and Pandemic Flu. And what this person is saying is, meanwhile, drug companies have banked vast profits, $7 billion to $10 billion from vaccines alone, according to investment bank JP Morgan. Now, the correction was this, that figure, in fact, came from a document published by the European Commission. And it turned out that it was a little bit wrong. It was only $6 billion that the drugs companies made from vaccines as a result of this particular scare. And really the main point of the BMJ's article here is valid, and that is that there are massive conflicts of interest going on, not least with Mr. Neil Ferguson, of course, who's had much of his research funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who are the organization that are going to be developing the vaccine that eventually comes out for this novel coronavirus. So there are massive conflicts of interest still at work.
And the Wellcome Trust, as well as running point for the government on vaccine research for this in this country. And I'll look at their funding sources as well, Mike, probably from the same funding sources. And this isn't the first swine flu scare, Mike. In 1976, the United States government, in collusion with the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, hyped up a swine flu pandemic and convinced 40 million plus Americans to get this vaccine in 1976. And that brought on quite a few cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome and a number of autoimmune disorders as a result of that, the lawsuits.
Because they rushed the vaccine through?
They rushed it through and it wasn't safe, and the threat was really hyped up.
Yeah.
And this is what was exposed by 60 Minutes and mainstream news organizations at the time. So there's been more than one sort of swine flu exaggerated, hyped up pandemic globally. And so there's quite a few of these if you really look closely at some of these. Even SARS, you look at what was going on around SARS in terms of what the WHO were doing, the conflicts of interest between the pharmaceutical industry and the World Health Organization as well at that time, and the CDC. There's quite a lot to look at there.
Okay, and let's move on to this one then. Google releases location data for 131 countries to show if coronavirus lockdowns were working. So anybody with privacy concerns here or who owns an Android phone might be concerned about this. So what they did was they made the raw data available to governments, but they published a report showing some of the outputs. So let's have a look and see what the situation in Plymouth is. And we can see that retail and recreation has fallen by 87% in terms of people moving around those types of locations. Grocery and pharmacy, well, we can see the panic buying spike there a few weeks ago, but it's now fallen by about 50% in Plymouth. Parks, well, we're not going to parks either, 43% down. We're not going to train stations or bus stations, 70% down. We're not going to work either, 54% down. But we do seem to be still going to our friends' houses and so on.
And our houses multiple times a day as well.
That's very naughty of us, and perhaps we might see ourselves being curtailed somewhat more.
Curfews
and so on.
More lockdown measures. But at least the exhibition halls in London, Mike, you'll see the graph go up in the next couple of weeks. So that's something that they can look forward to, or not.
Well, indeed. And we'll end with this because NATO has finally decided to weigh in on this, and NATO held their foreign ministers meeting yesterday, but they didn't hold it in person. They had a remote foreign ministers meeting. I'm not sure what platform. They said they had some kind of secure platform to host that.
My gosh, what took them so long, Mike?
Well, don't worry. They held their meeting, but the rhetoric hasn't changed. Let's look at what Jens Stoltenberg had to say. He said Moscow provided a notification that they were going to have a SNAP exercise, which they said was intended to test their capabilities to provide military support to the COVID response, to the civil response, to the COVID-19 outbreak. But we don't believe them. We actually judged that this was an exercise was also used to demonstrate to NATO that they remain combat ready despite COVID-19. So in spite of everything, Patrick, we can always rely on NATO to keep focused, Russia is the enemy, and that's all we need to worry about.
I'm surprised they're not planning to attack the COVID-19 itself, Mike, because it seems like the numbers that we're seeing, COVID-19 is more vicious against certain countries than others. It seems to be more biased in favor of Sweden and countries like this, but more virulent with the U.S. and the UK, according to Imperial College's numbers, of course.
Well, of course, and this would fit exactly with the levels of disinformation that Russia is pushing into those countries. So the countries with the most disinformation seem to be getting the most levels of the virus.
So when in doubt, go for the scorched earth policy, right?
Absolutely.
This is what NATO's view is on that. So we'll just end up here, Mike, and I just want to give a little quick masterclass here in something that we're going to call end times economy. So this is the situation in the United States, and I want to thank one of our listeners at the Sunday Wire for this. So this is from Walgreens. This is a national pharmaceutical chain. As you can see, this is a vitamin C. They're literally throwing it at customers. Buy one, get one free. Buy one, get one free. $7 off coupon. Mind you, it's heavily overpriced, of course, like everything pharmaceutically in America. But as you can see, they're throwing vitamin C at people, and yet, the thing that people need the most to strengthen their immune system, they're not buying. So the stores are throwing it at them, offering crazy deals. And yet there's a run on toilet paper in the United States. So that, my friends, is end times economy 101. So that really says it all. That is the coronavirus mass panic psychology in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Well, look, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much to Andrew Mather for joining us earlier on. We will no doubt have Andrew on again in the future. Thank you for joining us. In spite of everything that's going on, I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. See you then. Bye-bye.